enough of us so far. We want to go back to the second part of our interview with Paul Bissonnette. We're going to pick up right where we were speaking about his career and just joining the National Hockey League. So, I mean, now going to the other things, I mean, obviously everybody wants to make it in the league, but, you know, you made the adjustment. So the reality for you, I mean, how hard did that actually hit you when you actually arrived and took a look around what camps are really like?
The number one piece of advice I give to people that want to get to the National Hockey League level, like even younger kids, is don't be stubborn in your role. I'm not saying don't try to chase your dreams. And if it is a skill guy that you want to be, you have to take a step back at some point and evaluate, are you lighting up the league on a constant basis? Because if you are, okay, then sure. But if you're not, and you're going to be stubborn and that's what you want your role to be, well, eventually you're going to find out no team has a use for a guy who thinks he's going to be, a rusher when he's actually a crusher, and then he's going to turn out being an usher. Right, Rick? I mean, am I crazy here?
No, Rick, I mean, the same thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you know, it was a little bit different for me, obviously, is that, well, first of all, I thought I should have went fourth. I went fifth. Washington took Mike Gardner. That wasn't a bad pick, so I can't complain about that. Yeah, pretty good. But one of the things that I had to establish early in my career, which was really not part of my game, was the fact that I had to show people that I wasn't going anywhere. If I was standing in front of the net taking a beating, that I wasn't going to, they weren't going to intimidate me. So I fought a ton my first 3 years pro. And like you, got the shit kicked out of me, I don't know how many times. I was knocked out cold twice. But you know what? I felt if I didn't do it, I was going to get intimidated my entire career. And they were just going to continue to do it. So by them knowing that, hey, I'm sticking up for myself, and if I got a whacky across the arms of my Titan that was about that big around and break your arm, I will. And so that really helped open things up for me a little bit and gave me a little bit more room, I think, than they were tired of breaking their hands on my helmet, probably more than anything else. But,
well, hey, Squid,
or my face.
I thought you meant that hair and that hairspray. Jesus, you got you got some flow, buddy.
Just got to put a number on the side. Put a number on the side.
Not bad for an old fella.
I tell you what, the ladies were probably making panty soup up in the crowd when you were in warm-ups. That's for sure.
Hey, Squid, tell the story about Sather Senate with Semenko. I think Biz will appreciate that one.
Oh, it was in the WHA, and Semenko was in Edmonton, and Sather was a yappy little prick, and every time I went by the bench, he'd be yapping at me, because I always scored against Edmonton for some reason. I don't know why, but that year anyway. So finally, we're lined up for a face-off right by their bench, and he is yapping, and I just turned around and I said, "Will you shut up?" I said, "You were nothing but a pussy when you played." And he goes, "I'm going to send Semenko after you." And I said, "Go ahead." So anyway, that was a mistake, by the way. But
Semenko was so tough.
Well, so I'm playing against him, and I'm back checking. Yes, I was back checking, and it was offside at our blue line, so we both kind of turned, and he just reached around and suckered me, and then he grabbed me by the back of the sweater, hit me a couple more times. I was already out. Both gloves fell off. We both got 5 for fighting. So anyway, I was out cold probably for about a half an hour. So we're playing in Winnipeg the next night or 2 nights later, and I couldn't make the trip because my nose was like everywhere. And but we were back in Edmonton a week later. So same thing happens. He starts yapping. And I'm going to send Semenko after you. He called him Semi, I think. And I go ahead. So anyway, I got the puck by the boards. I see him coming, and he's got me lined up, and I go, okay, he's going to kill me. So I just got out of the way at the last second. He hit the boards, and he fell to the ice. I didn't wear a helmet. I took my stick, and I just little tap on the head. Just a little bit of blood, not a whole lot. I didn't want to make a big scene out of it. And I leaned down and I said, "You ever do that to me again, and I'll cut your neck off next time."
Oh.
And of course, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm either dead or he doesn't have a clue what I'm capable of doing, and he's going to leave me alone. Well, he didn't bother me the rest of my career, because I took it was a big gamble, but I took it and it paid off. And because he didn't know if I was capable of it or not.
And going back to what you were saying about how you fought early in your career, Dion Phaneuf came in the league as an 18-year-old defenseman with Calgary. And it's obvious that times have changed, and very similar to what you're talking about. He felt that he was getting challenged a lot. He fought 20 times, and progressively throughout his career, people just left him alone. They wouldn't go to the crease as hard as, because I think that when guys are aware that you'll throw down, you're going to hold your own, they tend to gravitate away from it. They kind of let you be, and they don't want to be the ones getting their eyes pumped shut.
So coming out
as a 19-year-old, in the WHA, I led the league with 248 penalty minutes, and that was a lot of beatings.
Yeah, but you probably got a lot of space out there after.
Yeah, you know what? It really helped, and Brof was their coach at the time, and he sat me down a couple of times and talked about that exact thing and said, this is something, and I already kind of knew I had to be a shit disturber in a certain kind of way to get some space, but he reinforced that in me. And I went on, and that first couple of years in the NHL was the same thing. And then Mike Nikolak was coaching in 81, 82, and he said, Rick, he said, we need you on the ice, not in the penalty box. And that was the best words I ever heard from a coach in my entire life. And then went on and scored 54 goals that year. So,
Rick, the coaches actually told me the opposite. They're like, we need you in the box, not on the ice. That's what I knew where my career was headed.
Hey, so boys, this one's for both you guys again. So coming out of your first pro camps, and we'll even talk about making your first National Hockey League teams, what did you guys find that was you weren't expecting, or did anybody take you under their wing? And what were the things that you just sort of walked away from that you weren't expecting going to those camps and being a pro?
I was a little immature when I first got to pro. I think I got excited that I finally had no real leash. I had some money in my bank account. I was fortunate where I always had great leaders, and I was part of great organizations. I played for 3 in my entire career. I played with the Kings, who treat their players incredibly, just as if the Arizona / Phoenix Coyotes when I played for them, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then also being surrounded by good leadership, because they run a tight ship there. I had Alain Nazardine as my captain my first couple of years in Wilkes-Barre, as well as Terry Virtue, who played a long time in pro in the ECHL. And then after Crosby in the NHL, I went on to play with Shane Doan for 5 years. So it's just, the biggest surprise, which it should have been, was just how professional the guys, especially the ones who had long careers, were. Just every day come with that working mentality, work boots on, first guy there, last guy to leave, taking care of their bodies as far as what they were eating. They weren't drinking too much, and they weren't partying. So it's really changed, Rick, and you can attest to this. It used to be where you put your bags down when you got to the next road city, and everybody would go out and grab a bite to eat and a bunch of beers, and it was a drinking culture, and that's the culture that when I first hit pro, it was very similar to that, and you slowly saw it fade away. Where I think Hal Gill and Bill Guerin, my first couple training camps when I was there in Pittsburgh, they would have a 6-pack after games waiting in their stall. And that is now it's a protein shake and the vitamins, which is fine because the game is getting faster and it is getting better, but it's definitely changed.
Rick, what about you?
Well, there's no question about that. I went to Vancouver, and we had some great leaders. Don't get me wrong. We had some great players who led by example, but we did go out quite a bit, and they were the ones kind of leading the pack and saying, okay, we're having lunch, and God love him, just passed away. Jack McElhargy was one of the guys that was one of our big leaders, and Donnie Lever, Dennis Kearns, Harold Sneps. Like, those are the guys that kind of protected you and took you under their wing. Unfortunately, under their wing was Silvar. and that's the way it was mostly every day. And but God bless Jack and condolences to his family, because he was a great guy, great person, and he was a great teammate as well. And that was a big thing back then, was regardless of how we lived, it was different than it is now. But you have to be different now, because you have to be in great shape. You have to take care of your body. But regardless of how it was, these guys were all fantastic individuals. Like, they're just, I mean, in the room and out of the room, I played with so many unbelievable people that it was, it's hard to name them all, because they were all great people. Regardless of how we lived, it was a different era, but the players were wonderful.
So now, Biz, when you finally actually made it, I don't know if you know or not, but you scored your first goal on November the 12th in 2009. Do you know who you scored it against?
Oh, yeah. I could tell you every shift that I probably had in the NHL. That's how few I had. And when it comes to goals, I have 7. I'll remember every single one. And yes, I scored against Carey Price at home. We ended up losing that game. I got in a fight earlier in the game, but I scored a fucking goal off my skate, Rick, on Carey Price. But when my grandkids ask me, I'm going to tell them I picked it up behind the net. I dodged 3-4 checkers. I split PK Subban and Markov and went bar down on Carey Price. It's exactly how I will describe it to my grandkids.
Absolutely. Well, you know what else you can add?
Should.
Well, you know what else
you should.
Add? Hey, you know what else you can add? November the 12th, 1931, for you guys, was the opening of Maple Leaf Gardens in the first game at the Gardens by the Leafs. So, Biz, you scored on the 78th anniversary. So, as a grown-up Maple Leaf fan, look at that little tidbit you can add to it for your grandkids.
Oh, I love this this podcast. Everything comes back tied to the Leafs. Hey, Rick, everything comes back. The center of the hockey universe.
well, I'll set it up for you guys.
Between Toronto and Montreal, it pretty much, those two cities are the center of the hockey universe, I would have to say.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, growing up, well, especially for me, when there was only 12 teams, I mean, Montreal, Toronto, that's all we saw. We never got to see any of the other teams, because that's all that was on Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah. But it was, Toronto and Montreal, that was it. So,
boys, for you guys again, I guess that these questions can work for both you guys. So we'll start with you, Biz, again. Was there a moment that you knew that you actually had made it as a professional, like there was some sort of acceptance in the room from the players, or you got that look or the nod from the coach, or something you knew, something you did, a fight, a goal, or something, or that one moment that you knew, I think I've made it?
It was probably a fight.
I want to
yeah. A couple instances. When I was playing with Pittsburgh, I got in a fight on home ice against Matt Bradley of the Washington Capitals. I ended up squeaking a punch in and ended up knocking him out. And it was weird, because all of a sudden now, when I was going out in Pittsburgh, people were starting to recognize me and stuff. So that's kind of when I was like, oh my God, this is like really weird. And then the second moment when I realized that I'd finally like established myself and made it, was we were actually in Nashville. Funny story, it all comes back around. The place I was drafted, when I ended up signing my first ever one-way contract, and I got a 2-year deal. And Brad Treliving, who was the assistant general manager, he's now he's with Phoenix at the time. Now he's with Calgary. He was in communication with my agent. I was like, oh my goodness. I think I was a healthy scratch like 10 games in a row. And then my agent called. He goes, hey, they want to sign you to a 2-year extension, a one-way. I thought he was fucking with me. I say, yeah, okay. I say, I'm just happy you're not calling me to let me know I'm getting sent down. And sure enough, I ended up signing that one-way 2 years, and it was really cool. I called my parents, and I'm a pretty conservative guy, and at that point, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right.
Hey, Ricky, what about you? So, I mean, you guys in Vancouver.
Well, I was on a one-way pretty much from the beginning. I mean, it's funny because my son played 1 year in Bridgeport, signed a 2-way with the Islanders. So he was making whatever it was, 600, I think was the minimum then. And he was making 150 in the American Hockey League. And he's sitting on the couch, and I said, "You realize that if you spend the whole year in the American Hockey League, you're making $30,000 more than I made my first 2 years in the NHL combined, because my first contract was 60, 60, 65, 70.
Crazy.
So, you know, yeah, it was, but mind you, that was a long time ago. That was 1979. But, he just laughed, and he didn't believe me, but sure enough, that's exactly what it was. But you know what, it was, I guess when I got to Toronto, there was some bad moments in Vancouver. Harry Neal and I didn't seem to see eye to eye, and I don't know what the problem was exactly, but when he told me I was traded, we got to Toronto. Punch Imlach was still as general manager, and he said to Billy Derlago and I, he said, "You guys are going to get a chance to play a ton here. Just go out and do the best you can. Be the best at what you do, and keep your noses clean." And you know, sure enough, everything kind of turned around right there in Toronto for me. And all I did was concentrated on doing the best I could every day, and that included practice. I wasn't a good morning person, and the guys used to know that. And they'd get on me sometimes in the mornings, and I would throw things at guys and run guys in practice because I wasn't a morning person, and they knew that. They would get under my skin, and that's how I approached it. Every day was like, you know, I got to be the best, and if I got to run a guy in a drill, I'm going to do it. You know, it's the only way that you're going to get better is by every day trying to get better. And I used to stay after practice and shoot pucks and tip pucks in front of the net. I used to go on the ice half hour before anybody with a bucket of pucks. It was probably the best moments I ever had in my life, actually. It was just me at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Oh, buddy. It's therapeutic.
Firing them up.
Therapeutic.
Firing them off the glass. It is. You know what, Biz? You're absolutely right. It was therapeutic for me, and I loved every second of it.
So now, I can hear you guys. And it's you know, you put the work in, you're going to get rewarded. And that's one thing about hockey and hockey players, and most things in life are attributed to that. And it brings me to that next sort of phase in your life, Biz, where you become very well known, and that's in the social world. And you're one of the first guys to get on Twitter and really take advantage of that. What gave you the inspiration to do that?
Scotty Upshaw asked me, why don't you get on Twitter? You can really joke around on there. And I just didn't understand it. I heard Charles Barkley talking about it, how stupid it was on ESPN at the time. And I agree with him, because a lot of people, what they were doing is they were doing it to just update people, being like, this is what I'm doing. But then I realized that you could go on there and joke around and interact with fans. So when I hopped on one summer after training, it was this, the season after we were getting some time off. And I remember Scotty Upshaw saying, I said, I'll check out what this is. And it just became fun that you could be that close with fans and give them a glimpse of inside the life of what it was like to play in the National Hockey League. And I didn't take it for granted for a minute. So I think they were just grateful that, the fans were getting like, oh, like what's going on their plane? And, I'd be posting a picture of like inside the private jet or whatever it was. So they found it fascinating. It was something that happened very organically. And I'm fortunate because I think the one thing that a lot of guys, after they spend their entire lives doing something, is they don't know what's next. Half of these guys probably played junior and didn't take their education seriously because they thought they were going to play hockey forever. And the ones that did is you walk away with not a lot of life skills outside of hockey. Mm-hmm. Well, I was fortunate where I get to now stay in the game and be involved in media inside the only thing that I've really ever known, and that's hockey. So it took me on a wild ride, and you kind of alluded toward it at the end of your what we said about the last answer is the hard work. Is that's one thing that hockey taught me is you got to get up every morning and you got to work. You got to put the work boots on, and I've never been shy to work hard. I kind of got that from my parents, especially my mother, and it's kind of just led into what's happened post career, and I couldn't be more grateful for it.
So that, you built up this network of fans and this following, and You know, the funny thing is, there's this guy Biz Nasty on Twitter. He's got funny things to say, and I think that Coyotes actually even did they tell you to stop for a little bit because they thought maybe you were spending a little too much time doing that.
They had to call me in to tone me down for the things I would say on there. At one point, I deleted my first account because my agent told me to get off because he heard rumblings that I was on here just creating up a storm. And I remember he called me. He's like, he goes, you got to get off Twitter. Like there's no good that can come of this. You know, you just fly under the radar, you know, play hockey and that's it. And, you know, that he couldn't have been more wrong. He could not have been more wrong about social media. And I'm glad I hopped back on because all the fans, the Coyotes fans, were messaging the team and calling the team and saying, why did you make him get off social media?
Yeah. And
they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know if we knew this guy had a Twitter account. And they said, hey, why don't you tone her down a little bit and hop back on when the season gets back going? And I did. And then it's gotten back to where it's gotten to now. That's why the first one was Biz Nasty. Now it's Biz Nasty 2.0. That's where the name derives from.
Okay. So, well, I know. Well, no, go ahead, Rick.
The funny thing is, well, you're talking about Twitter and Instagram, and I just started on Instagram like maybe 6 months ago. And I do a lot of things. I'm out doing alumni games and appearances and everything. I make sure that I, you know, use my phone, which I don't really know how to use all that well. But I make sure I get it done. I do have a guy that does my social media for me and kind of ties everything in and so on, but I make sure he gets the content and puts it out there. And I think it's a great thing, you know, especially for me at my age. But I'd hate like hell to think of what it would have been like if it was around when I was playing, because there were some characters back then that it would have been insane. It really would have been insane.
And going back to what you said about the you know, you jumped on Instagram now and you're around the town, you know, whether it's signing autographs or helping kids out, it's all about staying busy and just keeping your mind active. And that's why when I say I'm so grateful for it is I'm one of those people, we talked about it earlier on about how I need to stay moving all the time. I need to keep doing and trying to grow and do experience all these different things. And it's opened up those avenues for me in which you're talking about. Now you get to go do all those things. And I'm sure you being on Instagram, I mean, it led to us doing this interview. It'll lead to us getting you on the Spittin Chiclets podcast. And it opens up all these different avenues. I'm sure you've done, you know, 10, 20 things because you hopped on social media.
Well, you know,
it's made a big difference. I've done, I don't know, probably just through Instagram alone, it's probably led to about 35 or 40 appearances and ownership in a racehorse. And like, I mean, you name it, there's been so many things that have happened because of that. So I'm grateful that I did get on, and all these kind of neat, good things are happening now. And my son's a whiz at it. My youngest guy, he's much the same as you.
Hey, Mike,
keep going.
Mike, I wonder how many of those ladies that were sitting at the Toronto Gardens have been messaging him in the DMs on Instagram.
Well, I don't know. He's keeping that kind of quiet.
They're all dead by now.
Well, it's not funny to laugh that they're dead, but that was just fucking funny.
Well, but you know what? But the thing is, Biz, you know what? Like my son Ryan, when you called today, we were talking. My son, all his buddies, that's your demographic. Like you ask one of those kids who watched the game last night, any game, no, but he can tell you every play that happened, every comment that came out of the game, and every player. Like today, we were talking about when I was listening to Shaw today on your podcast, he knew right away who the player was, and he hadn't listened to it yet. But those kids, like we old dinosaurs like me and Rick, I mean, we're the guys that, you know, this is all new to us. But for you picked up on this, carried it, and it led to Spittin Chiclets. So, I mean, while we're on that wave, I mean, how did that all come about? And that's just taking it to another whole level.
So I had this idea of when I retired, I wanted to create this show where you'd show up to the rink with your hockey bag and you'd get in a locker room with the boys. You'd open up your hockey bag. You'd have your gear. You would never actually end up getting dressed, but there'd be beers in there. And, you'd sit around telling stories. And I have a lot. We did a lot of crazy shit off the ice. And I didn't even know what podcasts were at the time. So I told Keith Yandel the idea. I ended up going to St. Louis after my time with the Coyotes on a PTO, and Ryan Whitney was there, and we played together in Pittsburgh. And I told him the idea, and he was like, "Oh, that'd be awesome!" You know, we spent every waking moment during that PTO together. And halfway through that next season, I think he ended up finally retiring, and he said, "I want to start a podcast." And who's with me? And he tagged me, Colby Armstrong, and I think a couple other guys. And I text him. I said, "Hey, I'll definitely do one with you after I'm done playing, but I still got a few more years in the tank, and I want to enjoy my career." Well, Rear Admiral, a sports journalist from Boston area, a big Bruins fan, he'd reached out to Ryan. He'd done work with Barstool in the past. And he said, "Hey, I'll start a podcast with you. I have a mixer at my house. You come over, we shoot the shit on the couch. We interview guys." And that's how they started. Well, over the course of their first, whatever it was, let's say 40 episodes, Mike Grinnell, who's now our producer, had reached out to our Rear Admiral on email. And he said, "Hey, I think I can improve the overall sound quality, and I have a really good mixer, and I could produce your guys' podcast where you could just worry about being the host." And RA ignored the email. And sure enough, a couple episodes later, what happens? RA's mixer breaks.
Yeah.
RA goes back in his email, messages Mike Grinnell and says, "Hey, my mixer broke. Why don't you meet us here next week and you can record?" And ever since then, he hopped on the podcast. So now it was Rear Admiral, Witt, and Grinnell as a producer. Well, I finally retire. I did some film project, and I said, "Hey, let me get my feet wet with the Coyotes organization, and after the season, we'll see if I can end up hopping on." I told the Coyotes, "Hey, I'm going to hop on this podcast." We joined forces, and at the time, I think they were getting around 50,000 listeners an episode. And now, with adding the Canadian demographic, because I have a strong one, we're averaging over 500,000 an episode now, and it's crazy what it's gotten to, and we love it, and we're forever. I mean, I don't know what's my grateful count on this episode. Probably about 20. It's saved my post career. I'm so happy that it happened.
So why is it so successful? There's so many podcasts out there. What is it that you guys do that you bring to the audience that you think is different than everybody else? Like, why do you think it's so successful?
Well, it just adds.
They tell a lot of funny shit for starters.
That too. I mean, I told some pretty wild stories. Now I got a girlfriend, and we're pretty serious. When I first got on there, I tell stories about some of the one girl. We don't need to go into details, but it just got wild, and I think that's what kind of drew everybody in initially, and just the stories and the camaraderie. We got RA, who's a blue collar sports fan. He's giving his perspective. We have Ryan Whitney, who was kind of that silver spoon kid growing up, who was a very, very skilled player at the National Hockey League level, made a lot of money, has a lot of credibility, and then just kind of the hard-nosed guy who clawed his way to the top and got all the experiences from the NHL. And it's a great mix. I think we're all similar, but yet different in a lot of areas. And I don't know, it took off, and I think that I think people are enjoying it. And I think given what hockey fans, what they pay for tickets, and how expensive it is to take your family, I think it's nice, and I think that they deserve to hear and get entertainment for free and hear about all these guys' personalities and stories from behind the scenes, because then they're going to find out how wacky and down to earth some of these guys really are.
Well, see, what that brings me to the point that I wanted to bring through all of this is the National Hockey League has always been, and you touched on it, Rick's touched on, we've all touched on this, that hockey players are brought up to be team-oriented guys. No me. It's all, we, and it's all team-orientated. So there's no sort of standing out and making these outlandish statements like a basketball player would do, or some of these baseball players and stuff like that, when it's all about, self-promotion. And the league's no doubt had its cast of characters with the Roneks and Hulls and Luongos and Averys and all that of the world, you and all these guys. Do you think, and when I listen to your podcast, what I find interesting, even though I know a lot of hockey players and guys' personalities, but when you hear a guy like Scott Gomez come on there, I would never in a million years dreamt a guy like that would have the stories and the personality that he carried forward. And this guy was so down to earth and so humble, and the way he talked and told stories, he had me in stitches the whole podcast. And this guy should have his own show. And he's just one of the dozens. So the point being is this NHL, like, they've got to behind the scenes be applauding you guys, because this is what everybody says the National Hockey League is missing: personality. Like PK Subban tries to do it to a certain degree.
Yeah,
see where I'm going with this? This is something I think the next stage the NHL has to get to. Would you not agree?
Yeah, and I think that we have our own little bubble, and it's you also got to keep everybody happy, and that's what's so hard with corporate brands now is, we have some people who don't like our podcast and don't like what we talk about in some of the subjects we do focus on. Yeah, but it's we're just trying to grow the game, and I think that when people become just as excited about the personalities as they do as the product on the ice, it just puts your product that much more over the top. So I don't know what their feelings are, but we're grateful that they've been supportive of us, and we want to keep this thing going. We want to get hockey to the place where it's worldwide and where it's being played in China and where it's being played, all these different places that it's not being played, and it's to the size of the NBA. Maybe even, who knows, the NFL, which that's a mega ship.
Well, I mean, if it takes off in China, who knows what the possibilities are there,
Exactly.
The population. So, I mean,
Biz, as you were saying, like, you guys have just kind of taken off and everything, and you played in the ECHL. Earlier this year, how everything shut down in the ECHL. The guys didn't get paid their last 3 weeks. And I give you guys a lot of credit for initiating the fund to help these guys get paid. And of course, my son's one of them, so I'm happy about that. But it's not just about that. It's about just like the thought of you guys just going ahead and doing that. To me, I thought was unbelievable. And but so that tells me that you've never really forgotten where you came from and how you got there. For you to go and take that initiative.
Yeah. So what you're alluding to is when this all got shut down, the ECHL, where your son was playing at the time, they were the first ones to cancel everything, because the owners in that league, they have to pay for the apartments. It just didn't look like there was light at the end of the tunnel. And unfortunately, it's the type of league where, these guys don't have guaranteed contracts. And at the time, it was uncertain whether they were going to be paid their last 3 weeks. I, as I mentioned earlier, started my professional career in the ECHL. I was fortunate enough to be on an entry-level contract where I had teammates that were making, $250 after taxes a week. And I know what these guys go through in the summertime because they don't get paid throughout the summertime. And some of them, are so passionate about hockey, but yet they can't afford training and or the proper, supplies in order to get themselves to that AHL level and or the NHL level. And I talk about the ECHL quite a bit on my podcast, and I'm actually grateful I got to spend close to 2 years there, because it was silly. We were staying at the Motel 6s and guys were doing it strictly for the love of it. And because I'd spent time there and I know what I'd imagine a lot of those guys are going through, especially when they heard they weren't going to be getting their paychecks. And that's not even talking about guys who have wife and kids to worry about. I figured, guys, let's try to raise a little bit of money here. We'll get some sponsors together. We'll release some of the interviews that we've done. We'll do it in video form on YouTube. And I think with the GoFundMe and all the sponsors together, and also he's not going to be happy that I say this, Dubas, GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he reached out and he said, hey, we want to help out. He donated money as well. We had one of our fans who's from Denver who wrote a check for $10K, just some random guy who's got money. So I think collectively, we're going to get close to maybe 100,000. We're at least over 80 grand. And I think that all the players are going to see every dime that they should have for that last 3 weeks. And hey, if we can do our part to help, whatever. It was cool to do. It was fun. The fans got something out of it. And of course, thank you to the sponsors as well. Budweiser, Bud Light, Boyke's, DHM Detox, and Can-I brands were all the 5 sponsors.
So any of the viewers or listeners want to make a contribution, can they still do that? Is there somewhere they can go?
Yeah, they can go to the Barstool website. I think we still have the GoFundMe up, and anybody can go donate. And listen, it's a very difficult time. That's why it was great to get sponsors on board, because we understand a lot of people, either got furloughed and or lost their jobs to the what's going on with COVID. So we didn't necessarily want to ask a lot of people for money, but hey, for those of you who have been fortunate out there, if you want to chip in and help these guys out who provide entertainment at a lower level, go ahead and do so.
Well, that's awesome. Well, guys, I mean, it's getting near that end where we've been going on here for some time now with you, Biz, but we gotta get a couple stories out of you. I know you love to get the stories out of the guys that come on. You had some wild times probably in the minors, maybe a couple of your early ones that maybe stood out that might have been fun ones. And Rick, I'm going to come at you too with one.
Well, Rick, I was telling the ECHL that the experiences I had. Well, we in Wheeling, we used to have this sleeper bus, and this thing used to fucking break down all the time. And of course, we're going to play Johnstown, and luckily we have a booster bus that's following us, and it breaks down halfway on the way to the game, and they can't fix it. So we have to actually get all the boosters off the booster bus. They help us load all of our bags over into the normal bus, and they sat on the side of the highway and waited until our bus was fixed, and they took it to the game, where we got there, just in time, because they were behind us and they gave us their bus. Yeah. So these fans, man, they're not only loyal and willing to follow us to games at those lower levels, but in a time of need where we would have been late for the game, they even give us their booster bus. So that was a wild experience.
Like Slapshot.
It was like Slapshot, and those are the little moments at the ECHL level that kind of they put a little hair on your nuts, and they make you appreciate when you get to the NHL and you're on a private jet eating filet that life is very, very, very good.
So what was one of your first NHL stories that kind of would have you just going home at night chuckling? Because again, it'd be new to you when you finally get to the show, and first kind of bit of a shocker of a story coming home, or maybe it didn't shock you.
Well, of course, at the NHL level, guys are making quite a bit of money, and I spent that first year in the NHL up and down. I ended up playing 15 games. I was probably there for about 35. And had the chance to play with Evgeny Malkin, as I mentioned. So the following year, I was at training camp, and they'd gone to the finals and lost to Detroit. And Malkin had an incredible season, hit all these bonuses in his contract. So I'm riding the stationary bike next to him, Rick, in training camp. And the PR guy at the time comes over and he drops off an envelope. And Gino, as we call Evgeny Malkin, as he's riding the stationary bike sweating, he peeks in and you could see a smirk on his face, and he puts it in the cup holder. And I said, Gino, I said, what is that? And he goes, chick. I said, check for what? And he's like, bonus. I said, show me. And he kind of like, and I said, come on, show me. And he handed it over to me, and I looked inside of it, just shy of $1 million. I couldn't believe my eyes looking at a check. I thought it was a phone number for crying out loud. It was, although they are 7 digits, but it was just shy of $1 million. And I said, oh my goodness, this is the National Hockey League right here. So that was a quirky story that I had.
What about you, Rick, the WHA to the NHL?
Well, just a little story about how kind of things progressed. And my last year in Buffalo, we were going to San Jose. It was San Jose's first year in the league. So we went out there about 4 days early. And of course, we had stopped initiations and the hazing and all that kind of stuff. So what they did was, if there was however many rookies they would take the whole team out for dinner, and they would pay for it. So we go to this nice restaurant not too far from the hotel, and there's LaFontaine, myself, Dale Howard, Chuck, and we're all there, and the whole team's there. We have 5 rookies, I believe, at the time. And so anyway, all of a sudden I look and I see a couple of guys are ordering Dom Perignon and like $300 bottles of wine. And I looked at Dale, talked to Dale and LaFontaine, and I stood up and I said, guys, be reasonable. Like, just I mean, $75 bottle of wine is fine, but not 200 or 300. And anyway, at the end of the night, the bill still ended up being like, I think it was $8,000.
Oh my goodness.
So those five guys had to split that $8,000. But boy, it was a great meal. The shrimp were about that big.
Guys taking advantage of rookie party, that's a tale as old as time. The worst one that I heard was Chris Bork, and I want to say it was in Boston when he got called up, and he was the only rookie. They ended up racking him up for just shy of $25,000. One guy. He was the only rookie on that. Now his father's Ray Bork, so I'd imagine he's probably got a nice trust set up. So I don't think too many guys are feeling bad for him. But the surf and turf platters, the expensive bottles of wine, the Louis I had a shot of Louis the 13th at my rookie party. It was in Chicago, but they what do they call it? They called it a prairie fire. So they get me a shot of Louis the 13th, but I think it was over $100 shot. And they doused the rest of the glass in Tabasco sauce.
Tabasco sauce, yeah.
So I had to shoot this thing. I ended up going back over.
I got a good one for you.
Oh, Jesus. Light the campfire.
You know Darren Pang.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you work beside him probably a few nights a year. So when I was in Chicago, we're in Hartford, which actually was Springfield because the roof had we were in Hartford. And so instead of them buying us dinner, we said, okay, we're going to go to the bar and we're going to drink. And the rookies, I forget what it was, 15 minutes or half hour, would have to drink a shot of Jägermeister. So one of the guys was chewing tobacco and was spitting in a shot glass and happened to put it on the table. So the waitress comes over with a whole tray of Jägermeisters, puts them all on the table.
Oh.
Time to drink. Panger grabs that glass and swallows it. And I never saw a guy run to the bathroom so fast and puked his guts out for about 15 minutes and then came back and then grabbed one and threw it back and said, okay, I'm good now. And Panger, all about what, 5'7" maybe?
He ain't a big guy.
I don't know. Oh, he was a great guy, great teammate.
Oh, he's awesome. That, oh my goodness, that is disgusting. I'd imagine there's a lot of people that are that might even be puking out their window in their pickup truck listening to this right now. That is next level, man.
Well,
don't want to be drinking chew spit.
That's not a good one. Well, Biz, just in a wrap here, what's on the horizon for you? Like, are you going to be doing any traveling during the playoffs?
Well, so I got to call. What's that? What's that?
Before you go, I got to take Whit on in a game of golf too.
Oh, hey, you any good? You any good, Rick?
I'm a 5.
Oh shit! Oh my god, I'm like a 25. Wit's probably like a 2 or 3. Wit's getting really good. Yeah, we'll have to do a sandbagger with you. We do these sandbagger invitational. But what's on the horizon is I got to call the Coyote games. We're going to be doing so at a Gila River in Glendale, Arizona. We're going to watch it on the Jumbotron and, of course, call the games that are happening in Edmonton. And then once if the Coyotes make a deep run, I'll be here. If they're eliminated at some point, I'm going to head over to Boston. We're going to get a bunch of live interviews and we're going to do a bunch of podcasts and just really be watching all this hockey. I hope this thing gets off the ground because I need some form of entertainment and hockey does it for me. So we're going to look to expand on video content, more podcasts, and just like we talked about earlier, Rick, just keeping the mind busy.
Well, that's awesome, Biz. We want to thank you. You've been a great guest, some great stories, and loved having you on, and thanks for taking the time with us today. And best of luck going forward. And maybe we'll see you at the Sandbagger Open when you come up here.
Maybe you could carry Rick's bag. I don't know how good you are.
No. I'll be playing. I'll match up with you.
Oh, you're pretty good too?
Oh, no. I'm about like you.
Okay, perfect.
You and I will be even.
That'll be a good match-off then. That's awesome.
But see, the difference is I'll get inside Whit's head. See,
that ain't hard. He's a bit of a mental midget, but oh man,
you know what I mean. That's what age does to you. It gives you all that wisdom, and I know what things to say to get inside of his head and everything else. So, and I learned a lot of that when I played too.
I'll have him give you a noogie so he messes up your hair. Maybe that'll throw off your game.
Okay, well, guys, we want to give a big shout out and thanks to Paul Bissonnette, Biz Nasty, for coming on and enlightening us on the world of Spittin Chiclets and the social media world, which is a little above the heads of me and my partner, Squid. We're new to it. We're filtering along. We're doing the best we can, but boy, oh boy, it's certainly taken a life of its own. And he definitely is a character, isn't he? We love this guy.